Hello, academicians. Welcome back to our tutorials. Today, we continue with our spreadsheets content in the 9626 syllabus. However, if you are still in IGCSE, the content for today will be needful. So stay on, watch the video, and gain useful skills for your exam. Today, we are concentrating on cell referencing and how cell referencing is an essential part of spreadsheets. We are going to use very simple formulas such as sum, count, average, and so forth and so on. So, our learning intentions include explain the purpose of cell referencing in a formula or a function. Use cell references and describe their effects on a formula or a function. Describe the different types of cell references used in a spreadsheet. Demonstrate the ability to use named ranges or appropriate type of references in a formula. Let's look at them. Cell references. What are they specifically? So you can see we have a blank spreadsheet file. I'm going to input some data and explore what cell references are. In this cells, I have 2 and 2. I'll do the same value here. Now, when I want to sum up these two items, I can do so by entering the values in the cell, which will give me the same result as when I use the name of the cell. Okay, so we have these two items. In this one, we have used the values in the cell. In this one, we have used the names or the references to the cell. When we say the references to the cell, by default, you can see over here, Excel has a label for each cell based on the column and the row. If I should change the value in here, my function or my formula will automatically be updated based on the value in the cell. I have referenced the name of the cell or the reference to the cell. In here, however, if I should change the value, it will not affect the function that I have for this column. This is a simple explanation for cell referencing. Using the label for the cell in your formula instead of the values in the cell. Right. There is also another part of cell referencing called named cell or named ranges. We are going to try one. I'm going to create a multiplication table. A 2 times multiplication table. A very simple cell referencing will say, oh, 2 multiplied by 1 and so on and so on. We shall look at. Good. So, now if I have 2 multiplied by 1, which is giving me 2, can I duplicate? Yes, of course I can. So I duplicate this formula. But you can see here the output is clearly wrong. What is happening? Let's go to show formulas. Where my 2 is in B2. So for the first time, my formula works perfectly. B2 multiplied by A3 is correct. When I go down, I should have B2 multiplied by A4, B2 multiplied by A5, and so on and so on. Currently, that is not the situation. The status of B2 is changing inside this formula or function. One way to solve this is to have a named cell for my B2. How do we do that? In the formulas tab, there is a name manager or define names. Let's define a name and call it 2, which represent this cell. If you look in here where it says refers to, it refers to B2 and something else has been done to it. As compared to what we have previously or what we saw previously, the B2 had no dollar signs on them. Okay. However, in here, it is referring to the sheet, the name of the sheet, and the cell has actually been locked. We call this the absolute reference. Okay, so this time around, let me try my formula once again. Equals to this, using the name that I have created. And you can see it up here, multiplied by this. Okay, let me duplicate and see what happens. This time around, my multiplication table is intact. And that is because now my 2 has been locked perfectly in place. I can do same without creating the named cell or defining a name for the cell. Let's try it. So instead of creating a name and duplicating, whenever I reference, I can lock it using the F4 function. Mind you, depending on the keyboard that you are using, the F4 could be the primary or the secondary key. If it is a secondary key, you will need to combine your F4 function. What do I mean by if it's a secondary key? Mostly you realize there are other buttons on your keyboard, symbols on that particular keyboard. For example, mine has the playback button. So, and that is now my primary key. So the F4 is the secondary key. So to use that, I need to press on my my function and then F4. So I have now changed the cell into an absolute reference, which I'll describe the difference between absolute and relative shortly. Now, again, if I duplicate, I have the same values. Oh, what happened? Let me go inside. Oh, I said it's only equal to C2 multiplied by this. Okay. So I have the same output, and that is because now my C2, which also contains 2, has been locked in a situation we call absolute referencing. You will also realize that in here, in my formula, let me go back to show formulas. The 2 in this situation in column B has been locked through defining a name. In here, it has been locked by providing that dollar sign on it. However, my column A is changing based on the location of the cell, based on the location of the formula. Sorry. So in this formula, it is picking up A6. When it comes down, it picks A7. These ones, because they are changing based on where the formula is called a relative reference. Right. So I've been given a task. In this task, I've been told, okay, what we are using is okay, but let's do a couple of other multiplication tables. So I need a 6 times, 8 times, and 9 times, sorry, 10 time table. The question is, would I need to go through all of this and input a different formula there, and at every point in time I will lock the 4 duplicate, log the 6 duplicate, log the 8 duplicate, and so on and so on? What if I'm doing it for multiple timetables on the same spreadsheet? Will that be efficient? And if you have explored a lot of the past questions on spreadsheets, there's a catch that they put there. Use the most efficient method. So if I should go the way I'm describing, my method is not efficient. This brings us to the different types of references that we can have, even with relative references. We've seen what the absolute reference is. Either we name the range of cell or the cell, or we lock it through the F4 key, functional key. Right. So in here, if I should duplicate, and let's do that. If I should duplicate, everything is changing. If we come here, it is doing, let me show the formula again. This is providing us, in here, is providing us with 2, which is now an absolute reference. Now, instead of maintaining A, it has moved to the B column. When we come here, instead of maintaining the A column, it has moved to the C column. When we come to E, and of course, so you see there is this shift. It is moving to the next column anytime the function moves to the other column, the previous column is shown down here. What can we do to have this efficient method? So what we need is that, first off, this cell that has been locked, the 2, needs to be changed. So we remove the name range. Sorry, if we don't do that, it will still be referencing. So let's go to name manager and delete this name. Yes, we don't need it again. Okay, so now because the name is not there, this is what is happening. However, let's start our function once again. Our formula, this multiplied by this. Okay, now we agree that when we move to the next cell, the this should change. It should change from B2 to C2. When we move to the next column, it should change from C2 to D2. When we go to the next, it should change from D2 to E2, and so forth and so on. In this case, it means that the row is supposed to remain constant. In each case, it is 2, but the column is supposed to change. So again, using your function key F4, we can change it, click on it until you get the desired result. So the 2 should remain constant, but the column should change. Okay, so you see the $sign on the 2, but the B doesn't have. When we go to the next cell, the next cell, in this case, the column should remain constant, but the row can change. So again, your hand on your function, F4 until you achieve the desired result. So our column here is remaining constant, but our row is changing. Okay, so let's try and duplicate down and across. Do we have the desired result? Yes. So if we come to the 10 times table, go back to show formulas. If we come to the 10 times table, it is picking up 10 based on the position of our formula and picking up A based on the position of our formula in here. So it is picking A4, which has 2, and then the F2, which has 10. And you could see, or you can see over here, whilst we have duplicated across, it has also changed to the position of the formula, but it is adapting to the correct cell that we want to reference. This is a most efficient method that you have to look out for. All right. So far, we have seen creating a named cell or a named range, and also using the cell reference without creating a named cell or a range, but how to also um, set it such that even if we duplicate across and we want the column to remain constant, we can do so. If we duplicate it wherever and we want a particular row to remain constant, we will know how to do that. These are the, um, should I say, three types of referencing. So we've seen the absolute reference, we've seen the absolute reference, and we've seen the relative reference. In the relative reference, that is, so far as the cell is changing based on the position, we've explored where for if both are to remain constant, then we call that the absolute reference. We've seen where the row is to remain constant, but the column is to change. In this case, we put the dollar sign on the number, which indicates the row number. And we've seen where the column is to remain constant, but the row is to change. And we'll put the dollar sign on the column name, which is A, B, or C. The column is to remain constant, but the row is to change. We've explored these two types of references. And we see that if we want to do that, we can use the F4 key. Let's solve a question that uses the named range or cell and some form of absolute reference. And you will see mostly they will tell you use both absolute and relative reference. This is 2017 paper summer 31 is 0417. All right. But let's look at how they use named ranges in their calculations. In here, there are also the use of the sum function and I think the average function. Okay, so let's dive into this question. So the question says, open and examine the file 1731emp in a spreadsheet package. Save the file as prepared with a file name 173emp and your candidate number, for example, 1731emp. That's when we save it. And for both IG and A level, any file that you edit, you make sure you save it in the format of the software that you are using. If you are using Excel, that should be Excel SS. Please be mindful of that. Most, in the number of years that I've taught, there are a couple of students who work nicely, put the formulas in there, but they fail to change the file type to XLSX. And after they have saved and gone, you come back and you realize that all the functions that they have worked tirelessly to put in there is gone. So please be mindful of that. Place your name, center number, and candidate number, center and line in the header of the page. On the left in the footer, and mostly this is not a problem whenever you don't save the file type. It's really not a problem for IG because for IG you print out. But for A level, because your files are supposed to be saved and sent, if it is still a CSV file, all the formatting and the formulas will go. So please be mindful of that. On the left in the footer, add the text last edited and followed by today's date and an automated time. Okay, merge cells A1 to G1, format the. So take note of this. I think I explained to you why I go through the questions before before I answer, because there are some of the things that we do, and especially in A level papers, you have to do them somewhere earlier. Meanwhile, the question will actually be at the bottom. Okay, so it says we should merge this to G1, merge cells, format the merge cell so that it's 24 point. It is sans serif. If you are still being confused with what is sans serif and what is serif, sans serif do not have extensions on the letter. They look block in nature. So Arial is a sans serif font. Banscript is a sans serif font. Balo, as we see over here, is a sans serif font. Yeah, I know students like to adapt to just one font, like Times New Roman for serif and all that. Cambria over here is a serif font. If you click on Cambria, you see that on the letter W, for example, over here, there are some extensions on it. That is the basic explanation of what serif and sans serif fonts are. Now let me go back and change it to a particular sans serif without a design font. Okay, 24 point, it says it should be colored dark green. Let me go back to the question. The text is center aligned with a white 24 point sans serif font, and it has a dark green color. Okay, so white font, it has a dark green color. Let me force everything to show nicely. Okay, great. And it says that this file should be saved as make sure you have changed it to Excel workbook. If I was you, I'll even do that before I type in the name that I've been given, 1731 EMP, and then your candidate number minus 1000 as always. All right, good. To continue, it says that use cells A5 to B14 to create a named range, and we've seen how to create a name range. And we are going to see how the formula will be impacted when we use a name range as compared to when we don't use a name range and we only select the formula. So that is A5 to B14. So go to formulas, go to define name, The name they have given us is JC. Again, in the name, you realize that now our range has been created and it has a dollar sign on it. So it makes it absolute. In cell D18, enter a function to look up the job description of this employee. Look out for the next video on lookups, which will explain this. So if you have a challenge with lookups, look out for the next video. Job description. So the job description table is here. This becomes my table of reference. And where would I get the job code? You can see that in this particular question, this could look very confusing because the pay code has similar values as the job code. They are all letters. However, you can see here they have actually specified pay code over here, meaning this particular code is not related to this table, but to this, whereas this is rather related to this. So you open up your eyes when you have a setup like this. So this is my table of array. I also advise that you use this dialog box. It helps you to know whether you have satisfied all the arguments in the function and will actually give you an output even before you finish the function. So if there is something that you have done wrong, this dialog box will bring it out for you nicely. So my lookup value is here, my lookup table, and immediately I select this, it will put in the name of the range of cells that I've just created. This is a very simple table. It has only two columns. Our output is from column 2, and our range lookup is exact. I will explain all of this in our lookup videos. Okay, this time around, if I should duplicate, there shouldn't be a problem because the table that I'm referencing is constant throughout. Whereas the job code should change based on where the row is. Okay. Let's look at the pay rate. The question says, so we have done that. We have done 13 in 14. In cell G18, enter a formula to calculate the pay for this employee. Before we do that, it will look up the rate of pay from the pay rate table and multiply it by the number of hours worked. This formula must include an absolute range and two relative references and must not include a named range. So in here that we created a named range, it is not always that you use a named range. You will say, oh, but the table of reference, if I want to lock it, one way is to give it a name. Yes, but until you are told, you don't create your own named range. But of course, there is always a solution. So you stick to that. So the first of it, what I'm supposed to do is to extract the rate of pay using my pay code. So, and I am intentionally going to leave it open also in column 2. Again, if you should use a function, you'll get your output even before you finish. It's showing me 15 for A, and that is correct. But it is also exact so that I complete all my arguments for the function. Good. I'm not done. And multiplied by the hours worked. Okay. So this one is supposed to be locked. In the previous example, because we created a name, it was already locked. If I should duplicate this one, there will be some errors in my data because if I should click on this one, you see the table is shifting downwards. It's shifting downwards, as you can see over here. And that is why the question says there should be one absolute reference, which is this, because that is supposed to remain constant. And the magic key is F4 to turn it into an absolute reference, total absolute reference. Of course, you can use the same F4 to get it to a fixed column changing row or a fish row changing column. You can use that as well. So we have our two relative references and one absolute reference. This time around, if we should duplicate, we have the correct data because the table is intact. Okay, to continue with the question, and we'll be ending soon. We don't want to drag. Replicate the formula for 13 and 14. I've already done that. In F60, enter a function to calculate the average number of hours worked by the employees. Display this to the nearest whole number. So in question, average hours, this is equal to average, and that is how we call the function. Control Shift down will move to the last cell in this regard. And it says we should round it to the nearest whole number. So round, you can round, use a round function or use round up to the nearest whole number and give it a 0. Good. So 22 hours per week worked. And in G61, enter a function to calculate the total weekly wage. So G61, calculate the total weekly wage, which is equal to sum. In our objectives for today, we're supposed to look at a function called subtotal, and I'm going to explore that with you now. A question will later say format all cells that appropriately, and if they say so, you know that currency values are supposed to have currency symbols. So go there, go to currency, be mindful of the currency that you are supposed to use, and go to United States. Good. And what else? Yes, apply appropriate formatting to your spreadsheet. They have said it over here. Good. Now, let me explore the subtotal and how different the subtotal is from just a normal sum or average that you will use. So in here, I'm going to use the subtotal for my average. And this is an AS function. So you see average over there. I think when you come down here, you also see it. So let me do that. Average, and my range is there. And as they have said, okay, the average hours were not. Okay, oh, yeah, it's understandable, right? Let me change it. It is not currency, just a number. Okay, so, okay, let me round it. So you can see it has the same value as this. Let me do same for this. So equal to sum and, oh, sorry, subtotal and sum. You can see 109. You can also see 9 for this. Shift control down. Close. Okay, this equally has the same value as this. However, just a minute. However, what if I should filter this? So let me go back, go to filter, and maybe let me do number filters. less than 500, let's say. Okay, so I have extracted the workers whose pay for this week are less than $500. And you can see the sum that I used has changed. Like the sum function, in the sum function, the value remains the same, but it has changed for the subtotal. The same for the average. The normal one, which is the average function that I used, and the subtotal function that I used. The subtotal has changed. The normal average function remains the same. So the subtotal is dynamic in terms of whenever a data is filtered, it also changes, but the normal sum or average function will remain the same. So that is the difference. The first time I saw the use of the subtotal function, I asked myself, but can't we achieve this with a sum if? But then, after looking into it, I realized because that is dynamic, that is why it is used. So, in this tutorial, quickly, oh, yes, so we shall look at the VLOOKUP later. We have explored the use of cell references in a formula. We have described the different types of cell referencing, absolute and relative references. We've also seen how we can use named ranges in a formula or a function, and we can evaluate when or what type of reference to use. For example, where both the row and the column are to remain the same, where only the row is to remain constant, or where the column is to remain constant. Thank you for joining today's session. Practice, there is a practice exercise. If we are doing 9626, please go to the autumn 2020 question paper 2. It has some mathematical functions and also some of the absolute or relative references that we have spoken about. See you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Thank you. See you soon.